to master after doing Procter and Gamble and Pampers and Vicks Vapor Up? I mean, was it a 1 month study? Was it a 2 year study?
Well, it took 6 years.
6 years.
And frankly, it began when I was 18 years old, and further up the river at Harvard as an undergraduate, and I took a course from Daniel Ingalls, a professor of Sanskrit, and I took his Sanskrit course, and I studied for a whole year Sanskrit, and almost drove my parents to distraction. What is he doing, this boy? Gone to Harvard, we sent him to Harvard. Aur ye kya kar raha hai? You know? And but it gave me the confidence, because I realized, you know, the kind of education we all have. We study the classics of the West. We may read Plato, we may read Marx, we may read all these classics, but we hardly ever, we don't know. I mean, we may hear the stories of the Mahabharata from our grandmothers, but we don't read it, or from the TV serial. And so I felt that, anyway, I had the confidence, so I went for 2 years. I took what I called an academic holiday. And when my wife heard about it, she thought, what is this academic holiday? She knew about, you know, going away to Agra to see the Taj, that's a holiday. We have a beach house near Alibag, you know, near Bombay. And so we go and read books there, etc. But what is this academic holiday? Anyway, my idea was to go and read the Mahabharata. And so she was a good sport. She came along. And so for 2 years, I became a student. And I sat with undergraduates and graduate students. The difference was, of course, that I had far less hair on my head than my fellow classmates. And I was a taxpayer, unlike my classmates. And so I studied, and what I did was I interrogated the Mahabharata. You know, people ask me in India, especially, this has become a real issue, that Advani asked on television, why does this guy have to go to Chicago? Why didn't he go to Benares to study Sanskrit or Mahabharata? But you see, I did not want to escape into our past. I wanted the epic to speak to me today. And so you needed a critical inquiry. You know, the Pandits of Benares would have thought me not sufficiently reverent for the past.
Question on India. I mean, in spite of all the problems, the corruption and all that, there's also a new breed of entrepreneurs coming up in India. People want to take risks. They're optimistic about the future. So maybe we'll transcend this whole corruption thing. So we'll build sort of a new society on top of that. Because that might be a vestige of the past, where people think in certain ways, but the younger generation could probably break the mold. How do you see that developing? How do you see capitalism? And capitalism inherently is not supposed to be fair. You know, not everybody is equal. And you know, some people make more money than others. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think we have more important today than economic reforms are reforms of our institutions. I mean, prosperity will spread in India. Capitalism will spread. But happiness will not until we can fix, until we can get the school teachers back into school. And for that, you need accountability. So we need reforms of the bureaucracy. They are civil servants, jobs of a life, can't touch them. Powerful union. Then we need reforms of our police. We need reforms of our judiciary. We need political reforms. 1 out of 4 members in the last Lok Sabha had a criminal record at a time when 3 out of 4 members of the Chinese Politburo were technocrats. You see? But I'll tell you.
Is it a generational shift? You sort of see certain practices, the past 20, 30 years, but giving way to perhaps a new way of thinking? Are the new members of parliament who are, who don't toe the old line, who's saying, listen, we are trying to build a new India, I'm not going to be corrupt, I'm not going to, do the same things which others did? Do you see glimpses of hope?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think the hope comes from the following factors. That, and you're right, you began with entrepreneurs, and let me come back to that when that entrepreneur has risen to become world class with one hand tied behind his back, imagine what he will be able to achieve after that. And so so when the Economist, gives two reasons why India will overtake China's growth in the next 3 to 5 years, and one of those two reasons, one is the demographics, but second reason is the entrepreneur. And Raj, we should before we stop, we should talk about the great entrepreneur within the Mahabharata. He's everybody's hero, and that's Karna. In fact, I often wonder why Indian mothers, he's such a tragic figure, that why Indian mothers give the name Karna to their children. I mean, you can understand Arjun. He is CEO material. He's a success. So every fifth Indian is called Arjuna. But nobody calls their sons Yudhishthir. So Indian mothers have decided that it's better to be successful than to be good. But I do want to take a few minutes on Karna, because I think he's such
this is an entrepreneur's group.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So I think, Karna's story you all know, and many of you know, that he is actually the eldest son of Kunti. He is born illegitimately. She had received a mantra. She was experimenting before she got married, and she had this child, and she was horrified. And so she took this child, put him in a basket, wrapped him up nicely, floated in the river, and down the river he's picked up by a charioteer. So Karna is a royal prince who grows up as a charioteer's son. But of course he's enormously talented and enormous ambition. Great entrepreneurial virtues. And at those days, if you wanted to be successful, you became a warrior. And that's what Karna becomes. But at every turn, he is slighted. He's treated like what they call a Sutha Putra, son of a charioteer, which in today's affirmative action world in India would be called an OBC. And so one part of Karna's story is the pain of growing up being low caste in a caste society. But Karna falls in love with Draupadi. This is before she's married to the Pandavas. And she's a beautiful woman, and all the kings and princes vie for her hand, and her father creates a contest where you have to shoot at a moving target with this very heavy bow. Everybody fails except Karna. So he thinks he has won her, and he goes up to her to be garlanded by him. And just as he bows his head to receive the garland, she says, I won't marry a Sutha Putra, son of a charioteer. In fact, even today, in the villages of India, when a high caste person wants to insult a low caste person, he calls him a Sutha Putra. So this unrequited sexual yearning of Karna for Draupadi is runs right through the epic. But this story and Karna's story also illustrates something more universal. which is, even if you're not in a caste society, it's a problem that afflicts us all. And that problem is that we all want to be somebody. We don't want to be a nobody. When we are babies, there's no problem. Whether we cry, we break our toys, we burp, our mothers love us. When we grow up, then we are judged. People want to know who we are, what have we done, our achievements, our status. That's why my chapter 6 is called Karna's Status Anxiety. And you see, the sad truth of the human condition is that our opinion of ourselves, our self-esteem, is held hostage to how we think others perceive us. And that's why my aunt used to say that you wouldn't worry so much what others think of you if only you realize that they don't. That they are thinking what others are thinking of them, and those others are thinking what others are thinking of them, and no one's thinking about you. And yet we are obsessed. What is she thinking about me? And so, you know, Karna's story actually is an amazing story, because when the war becomes inevitable, remember I told you that the peace negotiations failed, Krishna, who is also the master strategist of the Pandavas, he realizes that these Kauravas are going to win the war because of Karna on their side.
She was the